welcome to the January 11, 2021 City Council work session. We are joined with our new city councilors, Councilor Matt Keating and Councilor Randy Groves, for the first time tonight. Very exciting, and congratulations to our re-elected councilors, Councilor Syrett and Councilor Semple, and I'm back as well. So all happy to be back and ready for a new year. Thank you all for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using in response to Governor Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives order. This format enables the City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping its members, staff, and the public safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling in to one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. Looking ahead, tonight's regular meeting will include a public forum. Information about how to participate in this meeting is available on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And as always, other avenues of communication with me and city councilors are available, including email and voicemail. And thank you again for joining us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the manager for our first agenda item.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome to the new councilors. As I said at our last council meeting, I always like to take a minute to just appreciate beginnings and endings. And so this is a beginning of our journey together. So it's good to have you here. Tonight, we have a couple of really great topics. We're going to start off with equity and community engagement. We have a great team here to present that, and then we're going to roll into the police commission. So both of them are super interesting, great way to start the year. So I think, Michael, I'm going to just ask you to jump on in.
Thank you, Sarah. Evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Michael Kinnison, and I'm here this evening with my colleague, Lorna Flormo. And we're with the Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement Office, and we're here for the Equity and Community Engagement Policy Development and Delivery work session. I'm going to ask, I think, Lorna to share her screen for our presentation. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that this work cuts across the organization and involves many different staff and a number of departments, divisions, and program areas. So we have quite a few folks that are panelists this evening, and if we need to bring them to the table, we'll ask them to step up to answer particular questions about the work that they do. Lorna, are you able to share your screen?
Okay.
Oh, there's okay.
My apologies. I did something wrong here. Just 1 second. Had it up and then it went down.
You're good.
All right. Here we go. Okay. Why?
I could pull
you
it
can
up
still, okay. All right. Share screen. Share. Telling it to share. Well, I'm telling it to share, but it's not doing it.
I tell you what, let me give it a shot. If you can unshare.
I canceled. Yep.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay, can everybody see that? All right, here we go. Okay. So once again, Michael Kinnison, I'm here with Lorna Flormo with the Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement Office, and we're here to discuss equity and community engagement, development, and policy delivery. Before we jump right in and answer the question, why consider equity in our work, let's start by creating some common understanding about what we mean when we use the term equity. A common misconception is that treating everything equally results in equity. And just by providing one option or the same solution doesn't necessarily result in the same outcomes for everyone. Equity is about meeting people where they're at and providing them access to information, experience, or resources with the support they need to participate as anyone else can. In equity thinking, we consider not just fairness in terms of equal treatment, but fairness in terms of outcomes. This slide image is a good illustration of the concept. Everyone is enjoying a bike ride, but with a particular bike tailored to meet their needs. That's equity thinking. The same concept can be applied to how we design an outreach process, a program, a policy, or a training. Another important consideration about equity is that it improves outcomes for everyone, regardless of need. In other words, we all benefit with equity thinking. And since we're in the process of public service, we have a moral obligation to serve all the public. The only way to truly do that is by committing to outcomes that reflect equity. All right, I'm having trouble. There we go. Historically, government has not always been the champion of equity. In fact, governments have facilitated inequity through laws and policies and practices that have served to marginalize many communities and create institutional disadvantages, some of which remain today. That is true for all governments, including our own. However, the City of Eugene has for many years recognized the need to protect the rights of the most marginalized, beginning with the Human Rights Code, passed in the early 70s. More recently, in the 2000s, City Council has passed multiple resolutions in support of the rights of immigrants, refugees, women, Jewish people, and Indigenous people, and clearly opposing hate, bias, and discrimination in Eugene. These actions are important to show that our government is committed to the safety, success, and well-being of everyone, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized. A key to achieving that vision is to ensure equitable outcomes when it comes to providing opportunities to access government resources and services. We've been building a foundation for equity work within the organization for some time now. I mentioned the establishment of the HRC nearly 50 years ago. We have had an office dedicated to leading this work in the organization for many years, formerly the Equity and Human Rights Center, and now Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement. We've established an interdepartmental board and developed plans to organize ourselves around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to be more strategic in how we approach this work. And we created tools and resources to build knowledge and capacity to do the work, such as the TBL, or Triple Bottom Line, and public participation guidelines. I would say we're still under construction when it comes to becoming an organization that fully embraces equity. Much has been done, and Lorna is going to talk about how this work has grown over time and the challenges that remain. Recently, an awakening has occurred among those of us in power and about how different Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and other marginalized groups may experience their government, and this underscores the need for us to keep building on the work we've started. And with that, Lorna, I'll transition it to you.
Okay, I think you'll be driving the slides, Mike, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So our equity work at the City of Eugene has been evolving and has come a long way, especially over the past 5 years, and we still have a long way to go. However, when I started with the city 20 years ago, diversity was much more of a surface exploration of different cultures. And now it's much deeper and more meaningful and focused on marginalized communities such as Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, Jewish and LGBTQ+ community members, and people experiencing homelessness, recognizing the unique needs of communities within those communities and looking at historic and systemic factors. Staff's relationships with community members from marginalized communities is growing. 20 years ago, we had a diversity coordinator who did the lion's share of the work. Next bullet. Who did the lion's share of the work. Now more staff are building their understanding about what equity means and learning to apply it to their work. Along with growing staff capacity, integrating equity into city work is becoming more organic and, very importantly, less of an afterthought. Getting away from checking boxes and the increasing understanding that equity work and improvements have no end. It's continuous. There are centuries of inequities to address. This work is a sustained practice. It's never done. Equity is not a piece of our work. More and more, it is the way we do our work. And this iterative nature leads us to uncover gaps, understand them better, and look for opportunities to improve. I'll talk briefly about these gaps and opportunities in a minute. First, I want to highlight a few more activities and initiatives. These next slides are not meant to be read. All the words represent equity projects and initiatives at the City of Eugene. It just gives you a visual taste of how much is going on. We highlighted a few initiatives in your agenda item summary. Now I want to share a few other initiatives from the AIS attachment, which is it's a pretty comprehensive list, but no doubt it's missing a few things. So one area is training and development. First, we have our belonging training. We started developing this training specific to our government and community back in 2018. We felt it was important that we all have a baseline of values and understanding around equity in order to collectively serve the community. We were just about to launch with our executive team when the pandemic hit. It took some time, but we modified and have been doing it via Zoom. It's a baseline training that has 3 modules: inclusive public service, working better together, and leading for equity. As a required training, we have about 1/3 of all staff in the organization trained, with the goal of our entire staff by the end of 2021. This has been complemented by sending interested staff to deeper training opportunities, such as coaching for equity and governing for racial equity, to develop more equity leaders in the organization. Some divisions, such as recreation, have blazed forward with developing frameworks for supporting staff around equity. We also supplemented our employee assistance program with wellness service providers who can support Black, Indigenous, and people of color and LGBTQ+ staff and their families. Another area is service delivery. We have our language access initiative. Language barriers block access to our government for some of our community members. By breaking down these barriers, we build trust in communities that have not often seen the government as a resource for them. We've been expanding resources and understanding around translation and cultural considerations that underlie language, predominantly for our more monolingual Spanish-speaking communities, because they are the largest demographic in need. We have piloted several successful programs, including Aquí en la Ciudad, here in the city, a Spanish Facebook broadcast done through an established and trusted community partner, La X, that airs every Monday night at 6 p.m., where Spanish speakers can hear about COVID updates and resources. In the summer, they heard emergency information about curfews and fires, and now about many other city services and news. The Spanish-speaking residents can tell us what they think about things like COVID recovery and about the Community Safety Initiative. The program has increased visits to our City of Eugene Spanish web pages, another language access initiative, by 84%. The city website was previously thought to be a resource that would not be well used by our Spanish-speaking community. A 6-month grant allowed us to develop this program, and we hope to find funding to be able to continue it. We also have added positions such as a bilingual, bicultural community engagement coordinator to the police auditor's office, an equity and access coordinator in public works engineering, and a multicultural liaison to the city manager's office. Adding staff that focus on equity and those that bring more diversity and skills and perspectives to our workforce increase our capacity to serve our whole community. In the area of planning, we have our cultural expressions and cultural currents work, including weaving temporary and permanent art, history, and stories into our downtown riverfront parks, farmers market, city hall plans, and other parks and public spaces now for 2022 and into the future, so that many communities that have felt forgotten can see stories, words, names, and images that make them feel like they belong here, like they and their families and histories are an acknowledged and integrated part of Eugene, all done with the engagement of marginalized voices. We have also used an equity panel for the Climate Action Plan 2.0 and an equity roundtable for our middle housing work. We've been educating developers and contractors for things like MUPD and enterprise zones on how they can ensure minority and women-owned business enterprises have an equal opportunity to compete for contracts and subcontracts through our equity and contracting program. In the area of policy, we now have Bilingual Pay, which is available to all employees, and this helps us with language barriers and access. In 2022, we'll be working with tribal governments to establish an approved way to do land acknowledgements and protocols for when our city government wants their input. We have added an equity function to the City of Eugene Future Emergency Operations Protocol, and we have our ad hoc committee on police policy and community safety initiative priorities. I could go on, as you can see the list in the attachment you have, but I want to talk a little bit about gaps and opportunities and ways that you can support this work. So gaps. We're actively shifting the way we do things, but where do we still have work to do? One overarching piece is that we're dealing with the accumulation of centuries of inequalities, and it will take a sustained effort and focus to start to unravel them and create more equity. So the first point is around staff development and cross-departmental coordination. We want to continue to grow the capacity of staff to carry out equity work in each department and improve coordination across departments to maximize effectiveness, and efficiency of our efforts. When there are only a handful of staff with equity as a central role, this makes it difficult to serve the entire organization. We'll continue the belonging training and other trainings like inclusive public participation, hate and bias prevention, and applying an equity lens, not just to staff, but to boards and commissions and community groups we work with, like neighborhood associations. The executive team has in process a strategic race and equity advisors groups that they're forming. One group will look at the internal workings of the city and the other at the external or community-facing service we offer. These groups will help advise the city manager's office and the executive team on race and equity considerations. And with regards to cross-departmental coordination, for example, if we're asking for input from our Spanish-speaking community on parks, it's also a good time to ask them about recreation, even though those are two different departments. The Parks and Recreation Systems Plan was a success story, and we need to strategically look and plan for more opportunities like this. This is respectful of the time and emotional labor that marginalized community members contribute and saves the city time and money. Centralizing policies and practices. We want to promote a systematized approach across the organization. Consistent resources and expectations help staff do their job, and this consistency builds trust. For example, with language access, if all departments and divisions have the same resources and know where to find them and under what circumstances to use them, we can consistently offer language access to the community. Aligning resources and timelines. Infusing equity work into the work of our government at all levels. Bullet mic, please. Infusing equity work into the work of our government at all levels and doing quality outreach takes time and resources. Efforts can be more successful and respectful when resources and timelines correspond with stated goals. Here are a few good examples. In 2019, City Manager Sarah Maderi authorized resources for a contract that will improve local Native American tribal and City of Eugene government-to-government understanding and collaboration. Council's decisions around financial support for ad hoc community members and extending the timeline for community safety initiative, the community safety initiative process. Developing ongoing relationships is really important as well, rather than transactional relationships or approaching people only when we need something. Being patient, open, and curious, as well as responsive, are essential to establishing and maintaining healthy relationships with communities who've been historically marginalized. So how can Council continue to support this work? As mentioned in the previous slide, equitable and inclusive outreach requires adequate resources and can have longer timelines. Being aware of this, like you've been for the ad hoc and the CSI processes, has been really helpful. Continuing to find ways to be more informally accessible outside of council chambers can help address feelings of disconnectedness or fear of government formality on the part of some marginalized community members. Also, clarifying what will happen when information you receive from community members. The International Association for Public Participation has a spectrum: inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower, and a particular promise that comes with each. What expectation does Council have for where a process should land on that spectrum so that those participating have clear expectations? Continuing to support diverse participation on boards and commissions is another way. Staff will continue to help these efforts with recruitment and recommendations, and ultimately, Council decides. Pursuing opportunities to build a shared language around equity work, for example, participating in belonging trainings or other trainings that staff are exposed to. And last but not least, practicing applying an equity lens to your policy roles. A good example of when you did this was a couple years ago when you visited a naming policy around Coleman Community Center and Andrea Ortiz Park, where you discussed considering community contributions, not just monetary contributions. And that sums up our presentation, and thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. It's a huge amount of information to cover. I think it was pretty awe-inspiring to see that attachment A with the list of all of the ways that staff has tried to create equity around outcomes and improve engagement. So thank you very much for that report. And looking around to see if there are counselors with questions or comments. I see Claire, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff, for that presentation. That was really interesting, heartening. It's nice to see the progress we've made, the commitment that we've made both as a council and city leadership to really embed these principles in the work that we do, rather than as one of you said, as kind of an afterthought. Oh yeah, and we should be. And that's really what is gonna help build it to fruition in that future state that you referred to as well. And just one particular thing that I really appreciate was the note about the increased effectiveness of outreach and engagement with our Spanish-speaking residents. So that's fantastic, because those are our neighbors, our residents, part of this community, and that language barrier can create a real separation where they don't feel like they can access all the things that we as a city have to offer, and those are their right as well. So that's exciting, and appreciated hearing that specifically. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Thank you. Yes, thanks so much. Whenever you guys present to us, I speak to you, I always learn something new. So I really appreciate all the information you give us all of the time. I wanted to say thank you for listing all of the resolutions because it is easy to lose track of them. And I was able to then use those numbers to pull them up and look and see, have we delivered on the things that we promised? And I was very happy to see that we're doing a pretty good job. I think we're actually addressing the things that we said we're doing, and that's great. And there's even recent things that I know are in the works that will be fulfilling some of those promises as well. So that was very heartening to see. I did have a couple questions or things I just wanted to point out. I was wondering if you could talk really quickly about this felt hat project, which my memory is that this is fulfilling some of our commitment under finding sites of memory. And I just wondering if you could share with folks what that was about.
Sure. We have staff that have been leading that project. So I think we have Josh or Shannon here with us. Would one of you like to address Councilor Ye's question?
Sure. I'm here, and Shannon, if you're here too, there you are. We have some information for you. The felt hat work came out of our town square process in 2019 when we were holding conversations and workshops with community members of color in what we were calling the cultural expression group to discuss how to create an inclusive public space with that town square area. So that was the park blocks, the farmers market, and the future city hall. During this process, we gathered specific feedback on the designs for those areas. And throughout that process, we heard a lot about storytelling and history as themes that resonated with people at those meetings. With changes to the Town Square project and as well as feedback from the community, we look to expand that scope to think about placemaking in all of downtown and not just specifically at that intersection of 8th and Oak. So we've been working with that ad hoc group in collaboration with the design firm called the Felt Hat to create a framework for incorporating cultural expression into our public spaces. And Shannon can talk a little bit more about the process for that.
Hi there, thanks for having me. And so after those steps that Josh has explained, the next steps were an iterative process where we met with the group 3 times, along with the designers and some additional city staff. And through that process, the participants in the group would share their ideas and give feedback to further refine the concept design and some of the themes. And what came out of that was this, a focus around storytelling and different ways to incorporate these stories within our public spaces through public art and urban design, so within the built environment. And so the outcomes, because it shifted a little bit, but the outcomes we created a framework that we are using now for our public art projects downtown, including the Farmers Market Pavilion and the Plaza downtown. So that's where we are at this moment.
Great, thanks for that. It's really exciting. Obviously, finding sites of memory is going to take some time. As Lorna told us, it's an ongoing process that doesn't necessarily have an end, but I'm glad to see you're making some progress. And that sounds really exciting. So thanks for sharing that. I noticed you guys talked a lot about training, and there were a lot of training opportunities within our organization that we're doing, and that was very encouraging. And very good to hear. I'm wondering how we've thought about assessing how we're doing. I know it doesn't look like we currently are planning any kind of external assessment, but it seems like something that should be on the list for the future. I'm wondering if you guys what your thoughts are on that.
I'll jump in and I'd be curious to hear what Lorna's perspective is too, or perhaps other staff. I think that's a good point, Councilor Ye. It's always good to take a step back and get another perspective on progress and what you're doing. And I think we're awfully busy down in the weeds, kind of responding to needs. And so sometimes it's maybe hard to see that big picture. So I think that's not a bad idea, and something that we could look at in the future. It's not something that I'm aware of right now that is in the works.
I would just add to that.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'll go after you.
Okay, I was just going to say, I would just add to that, it's something important, if that were to ever happen, would be to make sure and find a contractor who is owned and run by people from Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ+, the communities, the types of equity that we're trying to engage in the community or integrate into the city. I think that would be extremely important, that we look for a consultant that is from those communities.
I was just going to add that we actually talked about this when we were putting together maybe even last year's budget and then this year's supplemental budget, when we came around to December, around whether we should be putting in funding to do some type of equity audit. And at the time, the money is so tight. And so what we talked about was that it would actually be better to have this conversation with council and see kind of how you want to put this as one of your priorities, get a little bit farther in the belonging training, and but it is very much front of mind for the executive team.
Well, that's really great to hear. So I think it makes sense that it sounds like the training's going through the rest of this year. So kind of thinking about that as a time to initiate something makes sense. So I'd love to get more information on that at some point back on our options. You mentioned the news that you're doing out into the community and how the grant was running out. So it would be great to get some information on what it would take to keep that going, because that sounds like a really great resource for our community. And it would be a shame to lose it just because we don't have grant funding. And then there was one other thing I wanted. You talked about how, we've already always talked about how we could do better with our boards and commissions. And if staff has ideas about how council might do that better, I would personally love to hear it. So if you had some information or suggestions you could bring forward, that would be great. And my last thing would just be, we're asking a lot of you guys, and that's not going to stop anytime soon with the way our community is focused on this. And I worry about you having enough resources. So please share if that's a problem as well.
Okay, thank you. Greg.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a more specific question with regard to the development of our program, looking at contracting with minority firms. And can you tell me, do we have any data on that yet? Do we know how many, businesses of color are contracting with the city right now?
I'm not sure we have staff here this evening that has access to those numbers.
Okay.
Is there anybody in
No, I think
purchasing?
we'll
have to get
gonna
back.
follow up on that. I can see we have Mia over as an attendee, but I don't know if she's going to have that top of mind. So unless she she has her hand raised. Maybe somebody could move her over as a panelist. There we go.
She there? Okay. And the reason why I'm bringing this up specifically is because this has been a bone of contention with minority firms, small firms, medium-sized firms in our community that don't get a lot of access to public projects. And I'll ask this question too. How many firms of color or minority firms are working on the Riverfront project? Now I know we have streets named for people of color, but who was working on it?
Again, I think Councilor Evans, I'm not sure we've got those numbers at hand. We'll probably have to loop back and share that information with you.
Okay. Now, when I went through the AIS and we looked at the issues around hiring and retention, I didn't get a good sense of what that plan looks like, and how would it be executed.
Randy, with the Employee Resource Center, are you here? Could you address Councilor Evans' question?
Well, we'll put it this way. I do know some departments that have little or no people of color working in those departments. So that also would be helpful information as well. And if we could break it down department by department, because we need to know where we're struggling at in terms of getting good candidates, and specifically good candidates of color, and where our successes have been, and how those successes have played out within the organization. So I'm exempting the Human Rights Commission and the Human Rights staff on that. But the rest of the departments in the city, I would really like to know where we are at in terms of utilization and the ability for us to attract and retain those types of employees.
Do we have somebody from the Employee Resource Center that could
Randy was trying
speak to that?
answer, but Randy's been trying to answer, but I don't
Okay.
think we can hear her.
Okay.
Maybe Jen.
Happy to take a shot. Randy, do you want to just try one more time to see if you can come through? No. Okay.
So Randy, you'll probably have to log off and back on.
That's okay. I'm happy to answer the question while you do that, Randy. The Employee Resource Center has been working for a number of years to provide support to the entire organization about best practices related to recruitment, selection, and retention. We have really focused an effort this year on grounding in best practices and also doing some intentional work about building support for employees of color and employees from marginalized communities, with the focus and understanding that retention efforts and making sure that we're kind of cleaning up our own house is one of the most important things that we can do, so that as we continue to bring in more people from marginalized communities to serve as colleagues at the City of Eugene, they are coming into a place that really fully welcomes them and embraces their experiences. And so one of the efforts we have working towards that is to do this belonging training, recognizing that we can all continue to grow and to be more engaged in building a culture of belonging within the organization. And so one of the projects we're working on related to recruitment and selection is to revisit our current practices, to run them by best practices across the country with an expressed focus on addressing racial equity, and start building up more support and resources for hiring managers to ensure that we are doing the best we can to meet a really broad swath of people as we go out for position postings, and also to make sure that we're not losing people in the process because of steps in the process that might be impacting some folks more than others, people from marginalized communities more than other people who would apply in the pool.
So, and I got that, Jennifer. What I'd like to also focus on is how are you looking at building those support infrastructures for employees of color? Because I've heard on a number of occasions in different areas of the city that they have not been so welcomed, and to the point where some of them have been harassed. So I really want to know what we're doing to end those kinds of activities that are going on in some departments.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think the thing that I'll make sure to share is that we are doing work both with employees of color, and this is actually, I guess what I should say is we're still building a lot of these structures and systems as we're trying out new things and making plans. But one of the things we've been doing is creating intentional opportunities for employees of color to come together. In those meetings, we've heard from folks that they're interested in engaging around career development, in different kind of growth areas so that we can continue to support people through different promotional or development processes. And then the other side to that is that we are taking a respectful work environment policy very seriously, making sure that employees know where to file complaints or concerns like the ones that you're talking about, that we're supporting employees through a process of looking into those concerns, and also that we are doing our work to make sure that supervisors are prepared to, serve both as someone who can help facilitate a process if there are issues kind of peer-to-peer, colleague to colleague, and also to recognize their own role in supervising and creating a strong sense of belonging with employees of color. So I guess that's, I think that's maybe a softer answer than what you're hoping for. We're still building a lot of those systems right now, but be happy to follow up with more details as we have them finalized.
Okay, good.
Okay, Mike and then Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. Lorna and Michael, I really appreciate the presentation, and I certainly appreciate the work. I think that anything that we're doing to help all members of our community feel more like this is their home and this is the place they belong, I think is a good thing. So great job with the work. In a shocking turn of events, I'm going to ask a couple hard questions. I love it when Michael smiles like that. That's awesome. I understand racial equity when I hear those words. That's rather, I mean, that kind of defines itself when you understand the meaning of those. We often talk about cultural equity, that seems to me to define differences in culture or multiple different cultures. And when we talk about different communities, we use the words to kind of describe that there are different cultures and different communities all within our city, and that's awesome. But I'm wondering how it is that the city, through the work you do in departments, how do you define the difference in culture or community? Can one of you answer that for me, please? Not all at once, though.
I can't say that I've actually ever thought about that, Councilor Clark.
What defines a difference in culture?
Well, maybe I'll ask just ask a clarifying question. Can you help me understand what the context is for that distinction? What it is that
there are multiple,
how that might impact the way we deliver services?
Well, I understand that word in a certain way, and I bet Claire would understand it differently, and Emily would understand it a different way. I think all of us maybe understand that word when we say cultural equity. We might understand the definition of what defines a culture differently. I'm wondering how the city defines it when it goes about the work of trying to equalize outcome between cultures. I'm wondering how you define the difference in culture.
I think you're right in that there are probably, this could be a very long conversation and somewhat philosophical. some things that jump out for me in defining differences in different communities are, how folks in different communities, and again, you can talk about the Latino community, the Latinx community, or the African American community, or the Black community, but even within those communities, there are communities that are different. So it gets pretty diverse. But I think one thing is, how people have experienced the world. What is their common history that they've experienced? There's a lot to be said in that, because that allows you to go back and looking at, how has their history been erased? How has it not been talked about? And what types of barriers to resources have those created for them? Or what types of access to resources has that created for them? So I think for me, those are some of the nuggets of, and then you can also get into, pieces around language, like we talked about quite a bit, and the history and the access or the barriers to resources there as a more specific example. But so to me, it's like, how have different communities experienced our community, the world, the United States, Oregon, and a lot of that is connected to history and how that's either created barriers to resources or access to resources.
Is it all about resources then?
Well, I think in a really broad sense, like I said, I think it could be a big discussion here. And perhaps Councillor Evans even has some pieces, or other folks have pieces to add. Like you said, there's lots of different things, but I think resources can mean a lot of different things. It can mean funding. It could, one example that we use quite often and we talk about in our belonging training is the accumulation of wealth over time. If, for example, after World War II, certain communities were given loans and money to purchase housing, and other communities, namely our African American and Black communities, were not. And therefore, generations later, how does that impact what communities as a whole, not to mention just families and individuals, how does that impact their access to accumulate wealth to either pass a house along to their family or send their kids to college? I mean, this is just a tip of an iceberg examples, but there's a little bit of what we mean. Yeah.
I mean, the overarching goal is the thing said at the beginning, which is that the council has a goal to try and create a community welcoming to everyone. And I don't want to get too far down this road, but I appreciate, and as someone who has Native American ancestry as a part of my background, I understand the issues there. I understand intersectionality, but I would encourage everybody to let that one overarching goal be the foremost thing in our mind of making sure everybody belongs here in their own hearts. And I don't mean to get too far down this road, but there's still a group of people that it's okay to insult in our community and demean and make them feel unwelcome. Last council meeting we had, I got insulted by a fella, and I got a pretty thick skin, so I'm fine with it. I did this stuff on purpose, but if you're a conservative person, it's okay to insult in our community. And I would encourage all of us to consider the idea that the overarching goal, and there's never been a more important time, the overarching goal is to make everybody feel welcome and that they have a part of their say in our community. Thank you for the work very much, guys.
Thank you. I'm going to give you all a time check. I have 3 more counselors needing to speak, and we are at 6:20, and we do have another item. So I'm going to ask you to, both counselors and staff, just try and be fairly succinct so that we can get on to our second item. So I have Randy and then Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, Michael and Lorna, for the presentation. I think it's an impressive body of work. At the same time, I consider this a waypoint on a journey. It's certainly not an endpoint. And I think it's important that we keep that in mind as we go forward and continually try to improve our processes and our approach to this. In fact, the last time I saw one of these was probably 2015, maybe 2016. I almost feel like Rip Van Winkle that fell asleep and woke up and the world's different. So kudos for the work that's been done. I mean, it's significantly more than what we saw before. And then the last piece, I just wanted to touch on a little bit about recruitment and retention. I was involved with that in my former life here. And we talk a lot about welcoming people into the organization. What I found, it's equally important to welcome people into the community. Folks work at the organization. They live in the community. And if they don't have those connections and ties when we onboard them and help them get integrated into the community, it's going to be much more difficult to retain them and for them to feel successful. So I just, and I'm not laying that on the community. We need to help with that process. But that is, I think, a really critical piece. In fact, we lost one very good candidate that we had hired when I was still, I think I was deputy chief at the time. And that was one of the things he said as he was going out the door. He wanted to have a community that he could live with. He was from the Portland area, and he went back and became a very successful Portland Fire Bureau firefighter. So I just think it's important to remember that it's more than just the city organization. It's making sure we're tied back to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have Alan, Matt, and Emily.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Great presentation. I was impressed by the matrix, 64 items. It really does show all the stuff that we're doing to make our community more diverse, inclusive, and equitable, and welcoming. And while all that's great, we can do more. The list is really impressive, you know, from all sorts of things, from training to the TBL to panels and work groups to policy input and cultural stuff and access, especially the Spanish-speaking people. Like Claire said, these people are our neighbors, and then most recently the ad hoc committee on police policy, all in this area. So I think that's really important. I was going to bring up the resolutions as well. It's kind of fun to look at them and see what we've done over the last couple of years. The 2019 resolution condemning white nationalism and alt-right activities and groups has become even more relevant today. And I think it behooves us to look at that again and maybe bring it back to the forefront. And maybe somebody could read it because I think it's just as important, unfortunately, again, to have that one be out front as one of the things that we have said as a council and as the city.
Okay, Matt, and then Emily.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Michael. Thank you, Lorna, for the presentation. I've got two quick questions, and I'll be brief. Number one, I honed in on bill pay, bilingual bill pay. My first question is, first of all, thank you and kudos. Are there other gaps or holes in communication from the municipality to our residents that we can and hopefully should fill? What can council do to be supportive if there are? What comes to mind are perhaps parking tickets or elections information, etc. So that's question number one. Question number two, I noticed in the packet a coaching for educational equity program in which it's explained to us that 15 employees have taken a cultural competency or a racial equity 5-day seminar. Are those opportunities widely available throughout the city and or available on a voluntary basis for counselors should we decide to participate? And if so, I would jump at the opportunity.
Lorna, do you want to speak to both the CFET training and the opportunity there, as well as some of your thoughts on language access needs?
Sure, and I'm going to try to keep this brief along with the mayor's request here. So for language access, there's something called translation integrity that we talk about. So if you translate something like a parking ticket or election material, then you need to be able to support it at the back end. So it's just things like that that we need to think about in terms of resource and usage. So, I mean, I certainly am an advocate for language access, but we also want, you know, not to just put a screen of access by providing something and then not having the phone number or the website or the other materials to support it or the meetings also available in that other language. So that's just a consideration. But yeah, there's definitely work to do around language access. We could certainly do more. And then coaching for educational equity is a wonderful, I call it an experience. It's a really, really intensive experience. About 15 plus staff members have gone through it. It's pretty life-changing. I'm a trainer in it now. I think I think it's about $1,500 per person to go through it. That's including hotel and all the food and everything. So, you know, we've been trying to get different people from different parts of the organization at different levels to go through that training. And it certainly would be lovely to have counselors participate as well.
Thank you. On the back, Mayor, if I may follow up with you mentioned the back end. Do we know offhand what percentage of our employees are bilingual? And has there been a conversation about providing incentives for employees to perhaps brush up at Lane Community College or through the UO to learn a second language?
I'd be happy to talk at a different time when we have more time, more about that. I think that there's approximately 30 staff who get some sort of bilingual pay, mostly Spanish. One thing that I would say is it's likely a more effective way to gain those resources by hiring more bilingual, bicultural folks than trying to have people brush up on their Spanish skills. It takes quite a bit and quite immersion to get to the level to be able to communicate more than like, where's the bathroom and over there and that type of thing. So I would advocate more for the hiring and retention than necessarily trying to brush up skills for staff. But yeah, thank you for asking those questions. And I'd be happy to share more at any point.
Thank you. Emily.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. I'm also impressed by the many parts of that grid and went through a lot of departments. Some things were small, but they all add up to a lot. So that was great. And also, Matt, I had the same question, maybe not the 5-day thing, but can council take some of the trainings that are offered to staff? And you can tell me later. Thanks.
We've actually talked about doing the belonging training for council. So some version of that.
I'd appreciate it. That would be really good. More learning is helpful.
Okay, Greg, I'll give you just a quick second, but then I really want to go on to the police commission.
Thanks, Mayor. I can make this really brief. One, do we have exit interviews for employees that are leaving the organization?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I am piecing some technology together. Yes, we do exit interviews for employees as they agree to them. They are not mandatory.
Okay. And in those exit interviews, my question, I think it'll take up some time later, is, are we asking the right questions, and are we looking at, why employees move on if they're dissatisfied with the city? And the last thing is, are we prepared for some type of unrest that may be coming up in the next few days?
So I will leave the unrest response. I am going to make a jump that you are asking that from a police perspective to the folks who do that. I will say from an employee and engagement health and well-being standpoint, we continue to reinforce the need for all employees to be respectful and inclusive while they're at work, whether we're zooming in from wherever at work is these days or still reporting on site. We have upped the number of communication points and offerings that supervisors can connect into, and we continue to be often discussing safety, health, and well-being, as well as the numerous challenges that we faced in 2020 and now into 2021 with the labor groups who are impacted.
The question really didn't have anything to do with the police. I'm just looking at what kind of supports that, people of BIPOC folks can depend on with the city, if things, get out of control.
So Jen mentioned that shortly after George Floyd was murdered, the city rolled out an EAP program for BIPOC communities and LGBTQ employees by BIPOC and LGBTQ identifying service providers. That is a resource we continue to make available to staff and really encourage staff in this time and all times to access the unique resources that are available to them. We continue to try also to cultivate spaces where staff can have conversations and express concerns that they have around their safety and well-being, and we will continue to do so as we sort of move into the next couple of days.
Okay, thank you very much. It's clear that council could continue to ask questions and explore this for a lot longer, and so hopefully we'll come back and we'll get an update in the future, because it's of a deep concern to everyone. And so I want to thank staff for your time and your report and the thoroughness of your answers. And with that, I would like to turn to the city manager to introduce the next topic, the police commission.
Yeah, so that is the next topic, and I'm joined by Jeremy Cleversey from the police department and Sean Shivers, who's our police commission chair, and they're going to just jump in.
Hello, I'll go ahead and start us off here. So I'm Jeremy Cleversey. I'm the analyst and staff person that supports the police commission. I'm just going to say a couple things here real quick. Sean Shivers has been the chair of the police commission now on his second year. The biennial work plan that you have in your packet is a plan that's created for every 2 years. And so he has been the leadership in the police commission throughout that process. As you very well know, the last year with the political unrest and COVID has been challenging, to say the least, for police policy work. And Sean, and recently in the past year, V has joined him as the vice chair. And those two have been hard at work to be very selective in what policies are occupying the police commission's time. And so what you're going to see tonight is not the common just one biennial plan and report. It's kind of two, because we've essentially shifted and brought in a whole bunch of new police commissioners in the past year. And so I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Sean Shivers now. And
yeah,
Sean?
Thanks, Jeremy. I'd also like to mention, just on the tail of the last presentation, that they have opened up the belonging training to boards and commissions as well. So I've attended, many of the police commissioners have attended, and it looks like neighborhood associations as well are going to be invited. And I'm looking forward to some of those specific issues being addressed from that lens here soon. So I've got screen share ready to go. Everybody see it okay? Cool. Yeah, so as you'll see, we have a bifurcated work plan, starting out with fiscal year 20 to 2021. fortunately or unfortunately, the transition period coincides pretty closely with the murder of George Floyd, which allowed us to do, as you all know, expand the application period for the police commission, as well as make some recommendations specifically around that. It also caused some issues in that work, but I'll run through those as we go. So starting off with, we have the old commission and the folks on it. We have 5 new commissioners. Some of these folks stepped down and some of them were merely termed out. So we have 5 new commissioners in the new work plan. And we have a bunch of background information starting out with. For our newest counselors who may or may not be as familiar with this, it's excellent background reading, but I will spare you in my presentation from going over this because I know there's going to be lots of questions. We also break down the priorities. So I want to stress here as we move into this older work plan that these are not weighted in terms of importance of priority. These are merely the number of people who agreed that this should be a priority. So from there, I, as chair, had the obligation to prioritize these through meetings. We moved pretty quickly through these work plans, through these items at the beginning when we had the old commission, which allowed us when there was that changeover, it allowed us to reprioritize some of these emerging issues, including COVID, including protests, and we could also still mix in these old work plan agenda items as you authorized and asked us to do with that 2019 work plan. So as we move on to the more comprehensive breakdown, I'm going to avoid going through these bit by bit, but suffice to say that I start off with the ongoing objectives. As I think Jennifer Ye mentioned during the last presentation, a lot of these goals and objectives are not a one-time and we're done forever type thing, including equity work, including outreach to police officers and to neighborhood associations, and diversity, equity, and inclusion that you'll see on here as well. So these are part of ongoing objectives that we try to keep in mind throughout. Going down a little bit lower, we have some of the more like specific agenda items, specific policy reviews. Some of these things are a little bit less ongoing. So from this giant list of things we've done, I'd specifically like to call out this list of policies. We reviewed prohibited camping, search and seizure, arrests, temporary custody of juveniles, and all of these before George Floyd was murdered and before we had these new commissioners on board. So part of the police commission's work is an ongoing effort. A lot of these issues you're going to see again and again over the years as we make sure that they stay current. It's part of what I think makes the police commission so valuable, is that ongoing effort. In particular, we were one of the first boards or commissions to move to an online meeting platform. This is completely an aside, but I have immune system issues, so it was a tough but necessary call that we made pretty early on. As we talk more about outreach, I'd like to invite V, Vice Chair, who has been right by my side as we've done a lot of this work, to talk a little bit more about that. V?
Thank you, Sean. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As Sean said, I'm here to report on the community outreach effort by the Commission. Our top priority for community outreach is to encourage and invite public participation. We also have a goal of to increase communication between the police and the community. Commissioners have been listening and sharing our message through groups like Neighborhood Association and other community groups, as well as various community events. We've attended the Pride in the Park celebration, the Asian celebration, and First Friday Communities of Color, just to mention a few. In just one event, our commissioners contributed over 10 plus hours staffing our table in an effort to reach out to the community. These events allowed us to engage with the public, to share information, and to listen to our community's feedbacks. We've had wide range of demographics visiting our table, of visitors visiting our tables at these various events. We've heard many positive feedback from the community. In fact, one visitor who moved here from the East Coast stated that he was very impressed with Eugene's police oversight and accountability, adding that back where he lived before, some police departments didn't have such oversights. These events also provided the commission the opportunity to collaborate with other departments, such as the Police Auditor's Office, the Civilian Review Board, the Eugene Public Library, just to name a few. And as Sean had mentioned, we also began rotating our meetings. I don't know if you mentioned that, Sean, but I'm going to say you did. Rotating our meetings geographically by moving the Police Commission meeting, monthly meetings, to Peterson Barn in the fall, Sheldon Community Center in the winter, and we plan to make it to Hilliard Community Center in the spring, and then downtown in the summer before the pandemic started, but that never happened. These rotations had mixed results, but then when the pandemic hit and prevented the visit to these two other locations, we were able to then move our meetings to a virtual platform, which actually offered the community instant access to getting to our meetings without having to worry about transportation to and from the in-person meeting locations. So before our, because of our success of the virtual meetings, our chair, Sean Shiver, has actually opted to continue offering the virtual meeting platform, even if, when the social distancing is no longer required. Thank you, and I yield back to Sean to finish the report.
Thanks, V. Yeah, like V was saying, mixed results when we rotated meetings. I reached out to leaders in the area of where we were going to be, and nonetheless, Zoom had vastly more participation than any of our in-person meetings in my time on the commission. Another priority that we worked on extensively through this, particularly this first term, was continued discussion around homelessness and how the police commission can contribute, both in terms of oversight and building trust and providing bridges of communication. So one of the main vehicles for this, no pun intended, was examining our car camping policy, which previously was contracted through St. Vincent de Paul as a first touch for somebody who was identified by neighbors as causing a problem in a local area, making sure that a friendly face was the first one and a non-threatening face was the first one that came up to let them know that they might be causing some problems in the area. My understanding is that this now might be going through the Eugene parking enforcement instead of outside contract with St. Vincent de Paul. But nonetheless, it was a really good experience for myself and the other commissioners who are still here. how these things can all fit together, and where sort of our ability to affect change in the way things happen, as where that line is drawn, when it comes to the huge number of services and the scope that such big issues really have, and keeping us all focused on police specifically when it comes to that. Always, use of force and arrest are going to be coming up again and again and again. They're one of the most contentious and they're one of the most important issues to make sure that practice conforms with community standards. So these issues, I'm sure, will come up again, but we did recently complete a review of these practices and standards just before we got a new commission, which the last action of the old police commission, after the deadline for appointment had been scheduled, but before we had the new commissioners, was a memo that came through many of your inboxes recommending an ad hoc committee to review some of the ordinances and policies that might go beyond what the police commission scope is. So I know you've talked about this before. I still think there is a gap between the state level accountability and the city level accountability that, like with St. Vincent de Paul's contract, warrants some attention from time to time. And I'm excited, hopefully in this new work plan, that will be something the city council is willing to entertain us taking a look at in the future. Some of these issues that go kind of beyond the local. For example, the number of jurisdictions we have in the city and the number of times that EPD gets blamed for something that a private security officer is doing or something that Springfield is doing, which I don't want to try to step on their toes, but I think would help build trust of the Eugene Police Department to acknowledge that there is a difference, which I've brought up before in police commission meetings. So this won't be the last time you hear me talk about it. Then we get into the extended appointment process. Here I'm going to hand it off to V again because myself, V, Terry Robertson, were all involved with this from the very beginning. And then Silver joined when we had this massive load of police commission applications. V, do you want to talk about this a little bit? You're muted still. You're still muted in Zoom.
My apologies. Thank you, Sean. So as Sean said, you know, we've done an interview of a round of applicants that applied to be on the commission. The first time we did that was months before we reopened it. Thank you to the counselors who thought it would be a good idea to reopen, because it actually increased the second time we did the application round. The first time we did it, it was about 10 people, right, Sean?
Yep.
And
10 applicants.
This second round, we've had more than 10 times the amount that we had the first round. And the applicant pool was a lot more diverse ethnically, and we spent it was Sean, myself, Terry Robinson's, who else was there?
Silver Mogart.
Oh, Silver Moger, and then I think that was it, right, Sean? Just the four of us, yeah. And so out of the four of us, we spent about 20 hours each in total in reviewing the applications, interviewing the folks who we plan on interviewing. And as you can see in this graph, we've had 114 applicants. Then we filtered that down to 27 interviewees. And out of 27, we made 10 recommendations and to the mayor, and then after the mayor interviewed them, then 5 were then selected to be appointed, and council appointed them. And so it was, it was an arduous process, but the end result was definitely worth all the effort, all the time that we had to put into to picking out these folks and sending them over to the mayor. So I am very, very glad to have the opportunity to work with Sean, Terry, and Silver, and also wanted to really thank Jeremy for all the work that he did too in helping us, do all the tallying of choices. It was not easy. It was a daunting task, to say the least, when you have 114 folks, and they each all came with, their own qualifications, their unique qualifications that we all thought, were superb. And to narrow them down to 27 took a lot of work, a lot of individual choices that we all have to make in order to pick these 27 folks. So it was not an easy choice to make, to say the least. But here we are. We have our new 5 commissioners, as we can see in the bottom here. Chantel Robertson, Bonnie Dominguez, Maisie Davis, Ian Winbrook, and Dallas Boggs. All very, very good choices, that we've all made. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sean. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, V. I'd also like to point out, this is one of the most important, historic moments of the police commission. We did get some pushback from the community, who saw a list of, frankly, Black and brown people, and they assumed that these folks were chosen just for the color of their skin. And I have to push back against that strongly and point out the intersectional diversity and the sheer quality of candidates, allowing us to pick. I wish we could have picked 10, and I hope and want to thank all of the applicants who applied, as well as the commissioners who did the hard work of making a difficult decision. But I'm very, very pleased with the quality and the dedication of the folks we chose. So with this brand new commission, we also got to engage in a whole bunch of conversation around emerging issues in the wake of George Floyd's murder, in the context of COVID, and in the light of growing unrest from the far right. Some of the things we looked at initially, we identified with the advice of EPD, these 5 policies. Pepperball policy is fairly new. It's a new piece of equipment. We unfortunately got to see how effective it is. So we will also get a chance to review the policy again. We talked about civil assemblies and disturbances and demonstrations, and we have civil disturbances up, I believe, on this agenda or the next agenda. We also talked about handcuffing, control holds, and impact weapons in November. So this commission's off racing out of the gates with some of these issues. We've also identified some potential, if they don't make it before the next work plan, I have little doubt that they will make it onto the next one, particularly around domestic abuse in the context of quarantine. We know statistically that this has gone up as folks are unable to seek escape when they're quarantined with their abuser. It's a very sensitive and dangerous situation. So we plan on looking at how EPD is addressing those, as well as continuing to look at how EPD addresses public assemblies and demonstrations, and when those transition to disturbances, how that's handled. As we saw last week, it is a very timely discussion to be having. And we also engaged in a variety of research. This is more informational and less action required by the commission, but it helps inform our work as we go forward with a set group of people who gets used to working together, can really understand the nuance of some of these issues, and provide meaningful feedback to the department, and communicate that back to the community on an ongoing basis. Which I'd like to call out V specifically, suggesting biographies for the police commissioners be added to our website. So you see mine, I've got my contact information. Many people didn't opt for that route. I'd also like to call out Bonnie, who does speak 2 languages and added both languages to her biography, which, yeah, just one more example of how good this commission is going to be as we work together for the next couple years. I'm ready for questions, hopefully.
Okay, thank you very much. I have 3 counselors queued up and it's almost 7 o'clock, so we may have to extend this meeting, but Alan, then Claire, then Randy.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks to Sean and V for the presentation, and to Jeremy, who does a great job as the staff, and to all the police commissioners, the ones that went off, and to the new ones, and really enjoy working with Jennifer on the commission. Before I got on the commission, I didn't really know what the police commission did, or I didn't really understand their value. And when I ask people about it, they still don't know what the police commission does. People just don't really know. And the police commission is actually, and for the new counselors in particular, police commission is a unique body, and it actually serves a very important purpose. It's the only place where citizens go over police policy word by word and make recommendations to the chief of police. And it's really the nuts and bolts review of how the police operate and what policies they do. The great list of all the things that we've done in the past and are going to do, as shown by Sean and V, is a good example of that. And it also is the only monthly citizen interaction and discussion with EPD that occurs on a regular basis with the chief or the deputy chief and the deputy chief and others on the police department, and on almost every police matter you could think of. And we often just have an open dialogue at the beginning of the meeting and talk about things that are coming up that we hear in the community. So it's a really important forum for that respect. And it's such a much more diverse than it's ever been, the police commission. And I think that those perspectives are bringing a really good, healthy dialogue and conversation and perspectives to looking at the police policies. It's different than the ad hoc committee on police policy, which is looking at the Zero campaign and the 21st century policing. Those 5 policies that Sean put up on the screen are directly related to the current events after George Floyd was murdered. And those are the things that we're really looking at and inspecting on a word by word basis, as I said before. And, the police commission also has 2 members from, the ad hoc committee has 2 members from the police commission, 2 members from HRC, and 2 members from the CRB. And the police commission also has HRC and CRB liaison members. So it's a pretty diverse group and unique group in its makeup. And I think it's really time to start thinking about the ad hoc committee and how the council is going to process their recommendations. And I think that we may want to ask the police commission, given its unique position and makeup, to review and comment on the recommendations. So I think we need to do that and broader than them, but move on with that kind of processing of their recommendations. So thanks.
Thank you. Claire, and then Randy.
Hi, I'll just be very brief with some appreciations. I really appreciate this commission more than ever. Councilor Zelinka articulated some of those reasons. It's an important way to bring community input directly to the chief of police and to bring community members together to discuss and provide recommendations about police policy down to the nitty gritty. if necessary. And I want to appreciate the Police Commission for the efforts it put in to review and interview people who were wishing to serve on the commission. That is a huge amount of work and much appreciated. And lastly, I really appreciate and am impressed by the outreach efforts to go and table at community events, because that is a way to help the public understand that this commission exists, what it does, why it's important, and how they can actually bring their voices to it as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
It was a lot of fun too.
Okay, Randy and then Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Sean, V, and Jeremy, you as well, for the work that you're doing here. I think it's very important. Sean, as the chair, this question is primarily for you. But how do you see the information and the findings that's going to come out of the ad hoc committee? What are you going to do with that as a police commission? How are you going to use that in your work?
Yeah. So as was mentioned previously, we have 2 liaisons to the police commission, or to the ad hoc committee from the police commission. And I suspect that the ad hoc committee will not have time to fix policing in the next couple months, and that a lot of their recommendations will be the beginning of conversations rather than the end. So I really liked Alan's suggestion of utilizing the police commission and the work we did to get as broad of a police commission as we could earlier last year to take a look at anything that the city council wants us to. I know in the past, not a lot has come from the city council to the commission as direction that supersedes the work plan. We've gotten a lot of trust from city council to, work on the work plan we put in front of you. And I really appreciate that trust. And I also want to, I think the commission and the members of it have stepped up time and again to help the community. And frankly, I think many of them would be offended if we did not get the opportunity to do so. It also coincides really well with the creation of our next work plan. The ending of the ad hoc committee is a couple months before the creation of our next work plan. So the handoff there should be hopefully pretty smooth as well.
Great, thank you. There's a bunch of questions I'd love to ask, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to jump to kind of my last one. As chair, you've been on this commission for going on 3 years now. What have you learned from the process that might be helpful for us to know as counselors?
I think, well, I don't know if it will be helpful to you, so forgive my anecdotal answer, but the thing that I learned most is that as much as I want to reinvent the wheel, particularly around the homelessness issues, I came in wanting to put drop boxes or needle drop boxes everywhere, put trash services everywhere, put porta potties everywhere. And it turns out I was not the first person to have this idea, and that there are a lot of challenges that if I'd only been on the commission a year and then left for some reason, I would have left upset that those issues were never resolved. But because I got to see, I want to call out Sergeant Julie Smith from downtown, who I went on a walk along with, I talked extensively with, and who came to present to the police commission because she's been a powerful force for some of these equity and access issues. There are a variety of difficulties that I wouldn't have seen without her. V might also have an answer, but if we're going for time, do you have a quick answer, V?
Oh, as far as what I've learned being on the commission?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I've learned that there are different folks who are just amazing to work with, super smart. Silver, for example, Sean, and I've learned that community outreach, as some of you have already thought of, is incredibly important. Is one of the I think one of the most important part of the commission really is to help the public understand what we are all about. What do we do, and how do we help them as far as, with information, resources, and that. We, obviously we can't do outreach in person at the moment, but as soon as we can resume, I think that would be something that I think is important for the commission to do. We have incredible participation in all the outreaches that we've done at these different community events, and I don't see that with the 5 new commissioners that's going to change. It's still going to be a strong force of commissioners willing to put in their hours to staffing. And in fact, one of our counselor came to one of our outreaches too, and it was really a great opportunity to get to know our counselor and fellow commissioners doing the outreach with them. One thing I've discovered is that we could sure use some resources. Other booths have wheels to spin and winning pens and little knickknacks, and that could also be a great avenue for us to put our phone number, our, email address or something to the police commission, or even the police department. We can help promote, their number for the non-emergency or something. So it would be great to have that resource, in the future once, and I don't foresee that, this pandemic is going to go on indefinitely. I think, there is definitely light in a tunnel, that we can see right with the vaccine. So I think getting us some of that resources, will be great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I have 2 more counselors to go, and it's 7:08. So just a prompt, Matt, and then Mike.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. V, thank you for your optimism. And thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Sean, for the collaboration and partnership with residents, a wide array of residents, and with our police department. Just through observations and communication, I've recognized an intentional effort to shape or change up the language in policy to be more gender neutral and altering pronouns. Could you touch on that briefly, please?
Yeah, so one of the greatest strengths of the Police Commission is keeping police policy up to date with the community standards of today. One of the simplest and easiest changes is making the language gender neutral. It doesn't hurt anybody, and it hopefully makes folks feel more seen by the systems we've got. So it's kind of a minor tweak, frankly, but not making it would be inexcusable, in my opinion.
Thank you. Sometimes minor tweaks have major impacts. Reportedly, there's a transgender woman who was arrested over the weekend, and allegedly, this indigenous Latinx trans woman was allegedly held in Lane County Men's Jail. What policies do we have in place that protect transgender community members that would allow for law enforcement officers who are holding them in custody to hold them in places appropriate to their gender identity?
Yeah, this is obviously a really sensitive subject, no matter which way you slice it. My understanding is that these are jail policies rather than Eugene police policies. I had an opportunity to reach out through Jeremy to some folks who would know a little bit more, and they confirmed that that's their understanding as well. And I think it's still one of those issues that merits further eyes on from the community. I don't know if this specific issue will come up in the future. I wouldn't be surprised if the Civilian Review Board and the independent auditor saw specific complaints around this incident. I don't think that the police commission has a role. Actually, sorry, I know the police commission doesn't have a role in reviewing specific incidents. and I don't want to change that, but I do think it highlights the importance in building trust of the police commissions, potentially taking a look at these policies. So I'm not sure if there are any other specific policies under EPD purview other than the arrest policy, which I mentioned earlier. But I'm hoping it'll go in our work plan coming up.
Thank you, Sean. Mayor, I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, Mike, take it home.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say a big thank you to Sean and David and Jeremy for all of the hard work and for your presentation today. It was very thorough. And one of the things I noticed was the amount of hard work you had to do to help with the recommendation of new commission members. And I mean, as somebody who has sat in the chair of doing the appointments for boards and commissions and seeing the book this thick of applications, I feel for you, and I know exactly the hard work you did, and I appreciate it very much. I think that we did a very good job this year in rounding out the police commission in a way that it's very, very representative of our community. And I will look forward to hearing your opinions, and I hope my colleagues will encourage this as well. But I'll look forward to hearing your opinions on what the ad hoc policy committee comes up with, and then how you as the police commission review that work and its appropriate application to current policy. I will really hope that you guys take a deep dive there and see what you can do. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. If I can comment on that for half a second, I have floated the idea in the past just before the election. I called a special meeting to review the public gathering policy, and everybody was eager to participate in that work. So I suspect that same eagerness will be applied going forward.
Good. I'll look forward to your report. When do you anticipate it?
It depends on when the ad hoc committee gets us the recommendations.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much for this report in concert with my colleagues on the council. I think what we see this year, this police commission is incredibly important to us as a community, and it's a credit to the city of Eugene that we've had a police commission all this time, and that you've been very well positioned this year to help us navigate the next steps as a community. So thank you very much for that work. Thank you all counselors for your questions and your comments. It was a great discussion. And it's 7:13. We're adjourned for now. We'll be back in just a few minutes. So see you at 7:30.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.